hello. Come on in. Come on in. This is your show host, Maxine Phillips McKoy, coming your way with the Life Strategy Show. Good evening. Let me know where you are watching it from. Are you in Raleigh? Are you in what part of North Carolina? What part of the world are you watching this from? It would be nice to know that you are here. I will be checking the chats. I will be checking the comments to see who's let me know that they are chiming in and being a part of the conversation. Let's get started. I'm excited tonight about my guest that's going to be on here. But you know, the show is called Life Strategies for a reason. And that's because the individuals who come on talk about the strategies that they have put in place during their lifetime that has helped to propel them where they are today. Levelless is a part of my life strategy. Oh, I started out as GAMS Unlimited, but there's a division of GAMS Unlimited, which is level less. And level less is all about knowing your worth, advocating for yourself, and succeeding on your own terms. And see, we work with adults in transition. I mean, we're talking about unemployed, underemployed, those who need to be promoted but have not yet been promoted, or even unsure how to become promoted in the current job that they're in the roles and responsibilities that they are doing. And also, what about pre and post retirees? Well, you need to be able to repurpose those skills that you've been doing that, because I always say career is a lifetime, but life is a project. A project has a beginning date and an end date, but it never fails that when you see those dates, you always see a dash. That dash is who you are. That dash is your achievements. That dash is everything that you've been doing during your lifetime. That dash is a part of your legacy. And see, we even work with high school students and college students. And the way in which we work with them is because many times, think about yourself when you were a high schooler, maybe 14, 15, 16, 17. Were you sure about what direction you were going to take? What career path, what profession that you were going to go into? Majority of the time, we did not. Now, there are some who do, and I applaud them. But for those who don't, and for those who are stuck, and for the parents who are unsure how to help their teenager or how to help their young adult who's in college and unsure what degree plan to go for, or what even, the profession. What about military? What about working for someone? What about you just regular employment, right? But what about if you do want to pursue the educational level? But you also need to understand what direction you are going to take, and that direction needs to be complementary to what you do every day in your God given abilities, natural abilities, innate abilities. However, we define them is what you do naturally every day. And therefore, that's your sweet spot. Many times it ends up being your passion and a part of your purpose. Well, we have a person here today, and his name is Marc Lee. Marc Lee is the executive producer for Pod TV. That's right, Pod TV. And that's what we're on right now is Pod TV. We're on live, Facebook Live, but it streams to Pod TV Live. It streams to Roku Live. It streams to Amazon Live. It streams to, we are in at least 200 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, 200 countries. And the gentleman that I am about to bring up makes all of this happen. That's right. Marc Lee, the executive producer, and he has his own company, Lee Entertainment. Come on down, Marc. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. You actually said something that really resonated with me, Maxine, and I've actually talked to a number of people about this because one of the life strategies that I oftentimes talk about is something that you just mentioned, which is career versus job. And I know that when it comes to media and when it comes to things that have to do with event planning, I consider those more careers. And we do know that sometimes there are things that happen in our lives that we have, sometimes have to have jobs that pay the bills. And that is where I differentiate, because sometimes you will take work, and there are times that I've worked for Measurement Incorporated, even the Hayti, even though I love Hayti dearly, that fits more in the job aspect than the career aspect, because career is something that I have a deep passion for. And you were mentioning about those passions. So as a youngster, a young kid of preteens, I didn't know that I was going to go into journalism, because that was the time of Watergate and all of that kind of stuff. So I was watching people like Walter Cronkite, and definitely uh, Bernstein, Carl Bernstein, and Woodward, and all of that, and saying, "Hey, this is something that I think that I would like to do." And there were parts of journalism that also interested me, where they dove into the lifestyle. And I'm not saying that I necessarily wanted to get involved in all the lifestyle choices that Hunter S. Thompson made, but he did something called Gonzo journalism, which you kind of immerse yourself in what you were covering. So he went to the Kentucky Derby. He also got involved in the Democratic Convention and a number of other things. And sometimes there might be some less than scrutable things that were going on in that space, and that's the reason that I didn't necessarily want to go full Gonzo, but I did admire some of the Gonzo journalism aspect, where you would put in your life into what was going on. So like you're part of the political realm, you would go into those realms and go into some of those backdoor meetings. If you were talking to people that were in the drug culture, you might put yourself in that drug culture. And that was something that was a little bit too far to the extreme for my liking, and all in that take. But I did have respect for folks that wanted to do that kind of investigative reporting. So it's something that I thought I wanted to do, and did get a degree in that from the proud University of Marquette, and all along those lines.
All right, all right, all right. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, he's already dropped some platinum nuggets, because y'all know we go beyond, go beyond what gold, and we go all the way to the platinum. And so, Mark, you said a couple of things. You said, career versus job. And
Yeah.
that is so important, that individuals do understand that there is a distinct difference.
Mhm.
And that career is a lifetime.
Right.
But isn't it awesome that you've landed on that sweet spot,
Right.
that you have a love for what you're doing? And the thing about it, that if I'm not mistaken, I heard you say you determined what direction you were going to go, because there are several different options you had out there,
Oh yeah.
but you knew some of them were against your morals and your
Yeah.
values. So you chose the one that represented what you had a love to do.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit about that.
No, there's no doubt about that. Like I said, even in the journalism field, there were people that might do what used to be called the yellow journalism, which is kind of a type of investigative reporting that is not that favorable in the journalism space, because it's kind of the slanderous kind, and it's kind of the stuff that we even see to this day in the social media. So I knew at a young age that that was not the kind of reporting that I wanted to do. I definitely did not mind shining light on people that were doing negative things, be that folks that were corporations that were doing negative things, and other folks that were doing negative things. But I didn't feel that you needed to necessarily slander or do some of the negative aspects of what was going on. So that's why when I first learned about yellow journalism and some of that sensational journalism, I was like, no, I definitely am interested in the journalism field, but I don't want to go in this type that is a little bit too much on the sensational side.
Right, right. And that's so important, that at that age you were able to make that discernment, and you knew
Mhm.
exactly. But there are so many young people and our youth, between 14 and 19, that's coming out of school. They can't always make those kind of
Yeah.
decisions. And that's why we need mentors such as yourself. We need parents that's taken an active role in their students' lives, in order to help them make those informed decisions. So
No, and
again,
that's
I admire that.
one of the things I was going to add in terms of those life strategies is that, as I told you before, I was fortunate to have folks that are part of that generational wealth, that generational knowledge. So
Right,
definitely, I have some folks that are part of my legacy that I am kind of standing on their shoulders, because I have mentioned on this show, as well as other shows, that my parents started a radio station in rural North Carolina because they were fans of jazz, fans of blues, fans of
all
our
right.
voices being heard. And they were like, they're not hearing those voices heard. So when I was a preteen, they went through the process of starting a radio station with no radio background. My mom was trained as a guidance counselor. You're talking about people that guide our kids and everything. Mom was trained
Right.
as a guidance counselor, and dad spent some time in the military, in the Air Force, and also was involved in the civil rights and was trained as an engineer, but not as a radio engineer. So that is some things that I saw. And then, as I mentioned before, my grandmother actually there in Raleigh started the first African American library there in Raleigh because she literally saw a need for our kids to get the same kind of library service that other kids were getting. So she literally knocked on doors and raised the money to start Richard B. Harrison, a library that still exists to this day. And there's even an entire collection named after my grandmother, Molly Houston Lee, that even exists at that library, even as we are speaking. So that's some of what I am proud of, is my own family legacy. But one of the things that I'm always about is building on that legacy. Wow. So being proud of the legacy, but also finding your own niche and building onto what they set the groundwork for, and all along those lines. And I'm not the only one. My younger brother does a lot of work with at-risk youth and does a lot of work in that space. So we are definitely sitting on the shoulders of some great folks, but we are also building our own legacy. And even dad, and to some degree mom, will sometimes tease that when they get out and about, they are having their own legacy, but they are sometimes saying, having some of their friends say, "Oh, so you're Marc Lee's dad," and all along those lines. So like I said, they are proud of some of the legacies that I have built. And while dad is a well-known artist here in this area, he is also following and proud of some of the things that I am doing. So we know Father's Day is coming up, so I'm definitely a lover of both my dad as well as my mom as well, because she just recently celebrated her 81st birthday, and dad is going to come up on 83 and still active, very active. Like the dad's birthday is actually 2 days after Father's Day. So that is something else that goes on in my life, as well as that family legacy, but also maintaining that heritage and that connection to the family.
Wow, Mark, you just gave us a nice generational a line of, the hierarchy is how I look at it.
You know,
And you talked about your mother and your father, and they went into the radio business,
mhm.
having no experience, in that particular field. But Mark, what you just shared was the fact that when I talk about those innate abilities, those everyday abilities that you do, that you were born
Mhm.
with, that nobody had to teach them to you, you just gave us an example of that.
Right.
Because that's what your mother and father did. They used something that was already part of them, their DNA,
Mhm.
in order to move forward with that radio station.
Right.
They didn't have to have the formal training. They didn't have to have a piece of paper. All they had to have was that desire, and then it kicked in.
Right.
That everyday natural ability just kicked in that they were born with.
Right.
So that example, I love the fact that you gave that example, because I could piggyback on it and
Mhm.
show individuals and help individuals to understand that we all have everyday natural abilities that we use. We just don't even think about them.
Yep.
You don't even think about them. But how awesome would it be that we start helping our 14, 15, and 16-year-olds to understand those abilities, to discover them, identify them, or even confirm them, so they'll know what direction they are to go?
No, and ironically, you mentioned Pod TV earlier. One of the reasons that I really admire what Nick and Kim have done is when I think of their narrative and when they have shared with me their narrative, there is some parallels, because while they
Yes,
come from a different culture and definitely are not necessarily from the African American or other cultures along those lines,
right.
they definitely saw a need similar to what
Need.
we are talking about. So they saw this kind of needed that was not being addressed. So they had to try to approach some of the big corporations in terms of media, and we're given like some crazy hour, like at 2 a.m. when not many people are going to be watching stuff at 2 a.m., even if it's on PBS or on ABC or a number of other places that they had those dealings with. So when the pandemic was happening and when other things were going on, they were like, let's find a way to share our voices and to get some kind of perspective other than what we are hearing from the traditional media. So maybe some people from India or some people from Australia, some people from Spain might have some perspective that we don't necessarily have. So let's create this network, which was originally IBM TV and now is Pod TV, so that we can share some of these stories that people might not be knowing what's going on. Because if you remember when the pandemic happened, it was in other parts of the world before it got to us and
That's
all in
right.
that space. So they were wanting to inform people about what was going on and to share some of this knowledge that was out there. And there was all kinds of different theories that were being debunked even on some of those
Right.
early shows that they were part of. So while Nick comes from the world of being a pension attorney, and while Kim comes from the world of being an engineer, and I know you've had both of them on your
Right.
show, they definitely felt that this was a opportunity to build something that was not as cookie cutter as some of the other ones were in that way. And they've offered a lot of voices. I know they've given you a voice, they've given me a voice, they've given Sharon Campbell and Billy Graham a voice, they've given definitely Coco McMillan and Jacoby and a number of others a chance to talk about things that they are passionate about.
Well, you just said another mouthful, Mark. These platinum nuggets you're dropping. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all are catching this, because what you just said was the fact that Kim and Nick saw a need,
Right.
and that need existed especially during the pandemic.
Mhm.
I was already out there doing a live Facebook live, but I never had I would at that point I did not have the reach.
Right.
Once Pod TV and once Kim and Nick and yourself gave me an opportunity to have this platform, yes, I immediately jumped at it because of what you just said. The need was there.
Mhm.
And I started mine because I wanted to help individuals to become unstuck when it
Right.
came to the careers, when it came to work, because they were being laid off. I mean, by the thousands.
Right.
They were losing their jobs, and some of them were walking off the jobs. And
Mhm.
how do you repurpose those skills that you already have? You're not going to lose them, but
Right.
I wanted you to understand how you can use them in another arena. And so I came on doing career strategies, is what I called it at that point, because it was all about how do we get them back to work. But as it evolved, and you all gave me this platform, then it became life strategies, because I don't want it to focus just on career, because career is a lifetime,
Right.
but life is a project. So we need to understand that a part of life is to have a career. The other thing you mentioned when you first started sharing your story, you said that you do some of the things as a career and some of
Mhm.
the things as a job.
Right.
And one of the things that when I'm working with my clients, I help them to understand, you're right. Many times that job that you have is an 8 to 5, that is
Mhm.
your security blanket. It helps you to pay your mortgage and all those other expenses that you have. But I always say, but I want you to start going beyond that thought process. And I want you to look at your 5 to 8. So when you get off in the evening at 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, what are you thinking about? How are you using that time? That's where you started using that passion,
Right.
becoming an entrepreneur, writing your business plan, getting as they say, getting your ducks in a row,
Mhm.
right? And so when an opportunity presents itself, or if the company says they no longer need your services, you have a plan B.
Yeah.
Always have that plan B. So I heard you say that, and I admire you for doing that, always having a plan B.
Mhm.
And we already know, with all the books that we read, Mark, how many streams of income do they tell us we need to have?
They say you got to have multiple streams of income, and as you
Thank
were
you.
saying, that one of the things that was crossing my mind is as you know, am fortunate enough to have a lot of friends that are in the artistic field, and while they are doing what they call woodshedding in the terms of musicians and all that, and definitely fine tuning their skill, quite a few of them that I know are also having to work the gig economy. So they're having to go to work at DoorDash or Uber or Lyft or a number of other kinds of jobs
Right.
in order to maintain some money until that next step in their evolution comes along and they are able to make money solely on what they are passionate about. So sometimes you do have to step back and sometimes take jobs that are not necessarily what you are overly passionate about, but they help you get that nest egg that you need to do what you need to do. And ironically, sometimes they can find those connections, because a lot of what life is about, and it's something that I pride myself on being a part of, is that networking and that connectability. And I can't tell you how many of my friends that are in that space
Yeah.
have told me that they have run across potential clients, particular potential jobs, and potential this and that while they are actually doing those gig jobs, because there's no telling who you might pick up from an airport if you are in that space, or who you may deliver food to. And as you're having that conversation, you may find out that they are say an art collector, or they are a music producer,
That's
and that may
right.
be the person that can get you to that next level, whatever that next level is for you.
And not only that, we talk about the degrees of separation, right? And it used
Mhm.
to be 6 degrees of separation, but that's because that was before the digital age. And that's definitely before AI. And now it's, I call it a half, yeah, a half distance between who you know, what you know, and so forth. So you can get that connection very fast. The other thing that, is important that individuals understand is to make every connection count.
Yeah.
Make it count. And don't always let it be about you. Ask the person, how can you help them? Not everything is what's in it for me, because if you're talking about building relationships, the best way to build a relationship is to ask a person, how can you help them? What is it that you can do to help them move what their agenda, to move their vision forward? I'm not saying take over. I'm not saying spend 5, 6, 10 years doing it. I'm saying you still need to know how you can help them move forward, because it could be just a simple connection that you need to make, and the connection could easily be on LinkedIn.
No, LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. That's actually one of the places that I learned about this live streaming space at, and I'll definitely be mentioning the two folks. One that was on LinkedIn, the other was actually, I think, mostly on Facebook and YouTube, and I'll mention those in a minute. But one of the things that you brought up, Maxine, that I think is very important and can be a danger for a lot of folks, and I know that I have been guilty of it as well, is that we all have our own visions, we all have our own ambitions, we all have
Mhm.
our own things that we are very passionate about, but there can be a danger sometimes of letting other people's visions and other people's dreams be your vision and your dream, or that they
Right.
take over those visions and dreams. So that is one thing that I would urge young people to be cognizant of, is to make sure that if they are supporting somebody in their dreams, whether that is a friend that wants to be a basketball superstar, or a friend that wants to be a major chef or whatever, and maybe they're planning
Mhm.
to open a restaurant, that while you can be supportive of those ambitions and those dreams, make sure that they fit in with your plan as well. Because I do think that sometimes we can get so absorbed in the other person's plan that we don't necessarily pay enough attention to our own plans and our own ambitions and all along those lines. So that is something we also have to be very cognizant of, is to make sure that it's all right to support friends in their dreams and ambitions, but at the same time, you have to be aware of what your own dreams and ambitions are, and that you are not um, letting their dreams and ambitions dictate yours
Yeah, or deviate,
or
or cause
deviate.
you to deviate from your own visions, and aspirations. So it's so, and just do a litmus test, as to say, just test it to say, is this in alignment with the vision in which I have for myself, with my brand or my company or whatever it is that you've been given, your passion and your purpose. Is this in alignment? And if it is, how much time is it consuming?
Right.
How much time are you actually spending? So that will help you do a little easy test starting out. The rest
Yeah.
of it is, you just have to, as they say, tread the water lightly.
No, definitely have to do that and everything. I did wanted to mention, because we're talking about how folks get involved in this and everything. And
Right.
when it comes to radio, I was doing the radio as a youngster when my parents had that radio station. And one of the things I used to jokingly say, but I was only partially joking, was that when I went off to college, my mom would come and pick me up from the airport. And at that time, we didn't have all of this fancy internet devices and all of the phones and ways to get in touch with our friends and family. This was in the
Right.
early 80s. So, I mean, there was some of that stuff out, but it wasn't as prolific as it is on this particular day. So, mom would come and pick me up in the less developed RDU airport. It was still a nice airport, but it wasn't nearly what it is right now. And about halfway through our trip back, she would ask me, "So what are you doing now that you're back home?" And I would be like, it's not like I've called all my friends. I might have called one or two. So I don't really have any plans at this particular moment. And that is when mom would do what parents are very good at. I'm sure you've even done this with your own kids, Maxine, and everything, but they would do what I call the parental guilt trip. So mom would be like, "Well, I was at the station since like about 6 this morning. I did the news at 6 this morning. I came and did a lot of other work, some of the technology work, and some of the work that goes into making this station run, some of the office management stuff, and all along those lines. And then at around maybe, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I came to pick you up, and now I've got to go back to the radio station, and I'm supposed to be on till about 9 o'clock or something along those lines. And then mom would do that for trying a dramatic pause, and then she'd be like, so I've got a better idea. How about I drop you off at the radio station? A lot of your friends are already there and everything, and you do the feature and show and maybe one or two of the other shows. And then by the time you come home, me and dad would have food and everything else prepared. But I think we'll just drop you off at the radio station and let you have the moment of shine and everything in that space. Because she had a 12, 14-hour day. So I got to be the break as I was coming back home and everything, and I definitely enjoyed it. And it would sometimes do Let's Rap, which is our early hip hop show, and would hang up with some friends that have gone on to some fame in the radio world and other places. But yeah, there was a little bit of that parental guilt thing going on.
I love it. I love it how she just ease that on in, and that's why I say sometimes they say if you don't have plans, and somebody will make the plans for you.
Exactly.
That's why it's so important that you have some strategies and plans in place for yourself.
Yeah, no doubt.
But at the same token, your mom did, in a sense, she gave you experience, she gave you
Right,
exposure.
right.
And so by her dropping you off and allowing you to start getting your feet wet in this industry, look at where you are now and look at what you're doing with that experience, and the confidence level. It was a
Oh yeah.
confidence boost.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And I know that there have been opportunities, whether it is in the newspaper field or because I also worked at a newspaper, worked at the Carolinian when I first got out of school and worked at the Boca Raton News. So I've definitely worked in newspapers. I've even dabbled with a couple of interviews with Black Issues Forum and other in that television space, and even helped a friend with a couple of friends with some movies. So I have dabbled in most of the media that exist in one form or fashion or another. But that being said, it has given me the ability to talk to just about anybody. So just here on Pod TV, I've interviewed Michael Learned, who was on the Waltons. I've interviewed Ira David Woods, and definitely even in my life outside of Pod TV, I had the pleasure of doing an interview with Gary Hart when he was running for president way back when, and all along those lines. So that is something that we are all doing in that sense and in that way. So I'm gonna have to do a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back in a
Right.
matter of a minute or so. And I'm gonna share some of my inspiration, folks, that have helped that I mentioned in a minute ago and all along those lines. So if you hold on, we're gonna
Sounds
go
good.
to a quick commercial break and hear about some of these life strategies that you have been talking about as well.
I am Maxine Phillips, Chief Learning Officer of Level Less, a learning based coaching company that partners with parents to empower teens to create a strategy for succeeding in life. Are you overwhelmed or feel stuck when your teen is undecided about selecting a career path? Our college and career program provides assessments, individualized coaching, and workshops to help teens identify their unique purpose and select a profession that complements their strengths. Call us.
We're
Well,
back.
I'll tell you what, Mark is just dropping some platinum nuggets, ladies and gentlemen, and I trust that you are picking them up. Frank Jordan has said, great show. Thank you, Frank. Frank is one of he comes on quite often and he talks about Black history,
Right.
which is phenomenal. But,
Oh yeah, definitely. Frank has done some amazing things in that space. What I was
yeah,
going to share with the listeners that are watching the Life Strategy Show is that sometimes the life strategies can come when we are least expecting it. So, like I said, I've done radio. I've helped with the creation of North Carolina Central University's radio station in its early days with Donald Baker and with some of the other folks, including Jerry Carter and some of the others that were in that space and everything. But through that is how I first got introduced to podcasting. So I definitely knew what podcasting was and how podcasting was done and everything. But there was a young lady named Ty Jones and everything. She was actually, I think, one of the godchildren of Jerry Carter, one of the program directors. And she was like interested in this podcasting space because it was something that many people were getting in. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of podcasts throughout the world. And she was like telling me and others, let's have our own podcasting show. So that started off as Straight Talk with Ty Jones or something along those lines. And then eventually there was some differences as to how the show should go, because she was more into the entertainment aspect of things and all
Right.
along those lines, and we wanted to be more hard hitting in that sense. So, with that being said, she then said, "Hey, let's go create our own show in this way," and so we started what became Straight Talk with Dean and Mark after Ty had shifted away and gone in her own separate direction, and that is still on the air, even to some degree at this particular time, and all along those lines and all in that space. So definitely that is something that we were glad to get involved in. And from that came more of the live streaming. And I first heard about live streaming from watching a show that was, you're gonna get a kick out of this, Maxine, but there's a guy named Srinivasan that literally to this day will read the New York Times and will have guests on that talk about what is happening in the New York Times. And he is a PR person out of New York. So I used to be an avid reader and avid fan of his, and that was on Facebook and YouTube, and it's still on Facebook and YouTube. And he'll have guests on that are everything from authors to a number of other type of people in that space. So that was one of the first live stream shows that I did. And then I started meeting others like Brian Shulman, that does Voice Your Vibes and What's Good Wednesdays and Shout Out Saturdays. Voice Your Vibe is his company. And Tim Sohn, who is up there in Pennsylvania and does a lot of shows around health and things in that space. So I've seen in these amazing live stream shows, which is like the video version of the traditional audio version of podcasting.
Well, that's going to bring us to start talking about the difference in these different types of podcasts. But we got Sharon Campbell who's watching, and
Yep.
Sharon comes on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock, I think, 6 or 7.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. So y'all need to make sure that you watch the Sharon Campbell with Prospers, the purpose of wait a minute, Sharon, give me the right name. Plan to Prosper. Prosper is the name of her show. So be sure to come on Tuesdays and watch Sharon right here on Pod TV. So, Mark, as you were talking about the different types of podcasts, because I know when I first started my podcast show, I was just with the Facebook Live. I say just because I didn't know anything different at that time, and it was started during the pandemic. But help us to understand now, how can, first of all, how can individuals get into podcasting, and then secondly, what would be some of the strategies that you would like to share with them?
Well, there's a couple of ways that folks can get involved. Facebook Live is still an amazing way to get folks involved. I do know some folks that are still doing YouTube lives and things along those spaces. Of course, there is opportunities even here on Pod TV, even though many of us that were in the initial stages have been grandfathered in. But, Pod TV is a profit-making venture for the founders and all of those lines. So they are going into more of a paid model and all in that space. So they're definitely looking for a more of a paid model. And so there will be some of the newer shows that will actually be paying a set fee in order to have some of the access and all along those lines. So that is something that is changing. Another thing that is changing, but you don't have to worry about that, neither does Sharon, is that a lot of folks have been frustrated by the nature of social media. A lot of people have not been happy with Facebook or even YouTube or LinkedIn. So that being said, they are looking at a way to get more of those shows out. So they have created Pod TV Chatter. So Pod TV Chatter is a way that folks can do their social media and all along those lines and all in that space. So don't have a commercial break, but I'm going to turn it over to you for a second, but I'll be right back, and we'll be continuing this conversation in just a minute or two.
Sounds good. Well, Mark is going to be sharing exactly the difference between the digital type of podcast and Spotify, and how best to get yourself set up, maybe even some kind of equipment that you want to make sure that you have on hand, so that it's a great experience for your audience. I know there is important that you're able to post your upcoming guests so that individuals will know who's going to be on, and also engage the guests, because we like to ask questions and we want you to be part of the conversation. So if you have a question, go on and put it in the chat. We'll be able to see it, and we'll run it across our banner to let the audience, or those who are viewing, also see it. Know that, Pod TV is able to stream to we're in 200 countries. So when you looking at a pod area, you want to make, a podcast, you want to make sure, where is it actually landing? This information we're sharing with you today Not only is on Roku Live, is on Pod TV Live, is on Amazon Live, is streamed to 200 countries, is right here on Facebook Live. You have an opportunity to come back and view it. The thing about it is that individuals need avenue. They need awareness. They need information. And they're going to take that information and internalize it and understand how best they can use it. We're delivering the information, but once we deliver the information, you, the audience, will take that information, internalize it, and then determine how best to use it. So the
Well, I have
difference.
some news for both you and Sharon and other
Oh, what
folks
you
that
got?
are
What you got?
watching that
What
are very
you
much interested in this space and everything is that there is different platforms that you can use. So, like I said, I have used Blog Talk Radio to do the traditional podcast, and I've also used Anchor with my friend Dean Geronimo and others in that space. But I also had a Spreaker account and was using Spreaker as a tool for slight monetization, and I do mean slight monetization, and also a tool to use as a distribution tool. So it had been laying dormant for a while. So after seeing what we were doing on Pod TV and everything, I was like, hey, there's got to be a way that we can get our stuff on audio as well. So I reactivated my Spreaker account and several of the shows, including definitely I've got the online dinner party. I think I've got your shows. Matter of fact, I've got both you and Sharon's show, and I need to upload some of those episodes. But there are opportunities for folks that are into the more traditional method of hearing podcasting, meaning that they're used to hearing it on their car or in their audio format and everything. So
right,
this is an
right.
opportunity for them to hear this and not necessarily only have the video version. So that is something that is going out and is definitely happening. It is a process that I have to download them and then re-upload them and all in that kind of space. But everybody has got multiple episodes up, and we'll be getting more multiple episodes up in the next several days and all in that space. So folks can go back, and if they go to Spotify, if they go to iHeartRadio, if they go to Deezer, and believe it or not, there is a platform that is in India called Geo Saban, so they can might even hear you in India as well. So there's an opportunity that you may be heard in India because that is a podcasting network that also picks up other podcasts from around the country and around the world.
Well, see, that's why, it's evolution, right? It,
Right.
it continues to evolve. And that's what digital, it gives us the opportunity to do. I mean, this is a digital age, we've evolved, and so what I also like about what Nick and Kim does is that they're always looking at new avenues. What can we do to improve the I call it the viewing experience, because you want them to have a smooth experience. You want them to be well informed. You want them to be able to have a variety of things to offer individuals. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark, is it 24/7? They
Yep,
can go out there
24/7,
and watch this
24/7.
at any
Yep.
point and any time. When you go to podtv.tv live, you're going to be able to watch all of these episodes. You do have to scroll down to get to what's going on at that given date and time, but it's okay.
And even that's changing with the social media site, because there are a couple of places that you can go and literally click on that particular site and see what is airing. As a matter of fact, I know right now that what we are doing is airing on podtv.tv and also airing on Pod TV Chatter as well. So that is the social media site. And I want to say that Kim is trying to roll that out in July as a fully functional social media site. Right now, it's all in beta stage and all in that space. But just to so people can understand the vastness of the popularity, and it's something that I had heard before, but we're in all these various countries, but as of this year they are saying that there are, you ready for this figure,
Come on, come on.
464.7 million podcast listeners globally as of 2023, and it's predicted there will be around 504.9 million podcast listeners worldwide by the end of next year. So I want y'all to get that figure again, 464.7 podcast listeners globally. So that's how many people are actually
You gonna
listening.
have to, yeah. If I don't know if you're able to, then type that in there and run it across the banner, because I think that is phenomenal information. So Kim and Nick, listen, we thank you for doing what you're doing. We thank you for allowing us to have this platform to be able to share this great information with local, national, and international, the world. You're talking about 200 countries. I mean, that's a blessing in itself. So that's why, when we invite our guests to come on and be I call everybody my special guests.
Right.
It's beautiful to be able to share with them all the different areas and all the different places in which this information is going to be seen and heard. And we have Paulette Austin, who's just chimed in. Paulette, thank you so much for listening. Mark is putting these figures on the banner so
Right.
that you all can see the how it's impacting the world. It's impacting the world. So we call it podcast. I call it a TV show, but the whole objective is to communicate this, get this information out there so that individuals can hear it. They know that they're not alone anymore. It's about improving our mental health as well. We
Right.
have places that we can go and we can listen and we can get tips and techniques and recommendations, and we can see that it has worked for someone else. So some of the things we can try for ourselves.
You mentioned that earlier today. I did one of the shows that not just produced, but that I host as well. So I actually did the radio show with Marc Lee, which is the one that is on Monday nights, and they actually came with that name, meaning the folks at IBM TV, as it was known at that particular time. And then I came up with the other one that I love dearly, the title, which is the Online Dinner Party Crusher, because I was like,
Like
if
that.
you had a group of friends that didn't know each other and you invited them in for a social environment, kind of the old dinner party that you would hear about in old movies and everything, what would it be like, and what kind of interactive conversation would you have where people of different backgrounds meet and are connecting and learning about each other? It can be some very fascinating conversations. As a matter of fact, I know that there was a time that I had a theater person on with a tax accountant, and ironically the tax accountant used to be in the theater when he was a young man, and of course no theater can exist without having some financial background. So that was some of that cross conversation that took place in that episode. There was another time that there was a woman who unfortunately had lost her husband to homicide, but there were other guests that were in the theater world, and some of them had had some horrific experiences as well in their own lives, and there were some
Right.
shared stories on that show as well. So a lot of times the things that are going on are in that space. By the way, that's another figure that folks may be interested in. There are around 150 million podcast episodes, averaging 50 episodes per podcast. So that is how many. It's a very
Wow.
crowded market. But one of the things that, as I mentioned to you earlier, when I hear people talking about podcasts, and most of the time they are thinking about being a content creator. And that is what I am a big fan of, and all in that way, because I think that sometimes, not saying all, and I'm not saying that you don't want to pay attention to aesthetics, but I do think that sometimes we get too caught up in the aesthetics and not enough in the content and the quality of the content. So a lot of
Right.
times when I bring on guests, or when I am talking to guests, or when you are talking to guests, I am oftentimes amazed at the quality of information that they're getting. Some of these life lessons that we've been talking about
Yes.
on
Yeah.
this day. And if you can definitely want the right lighting, the right mic, the right this and the right that. But I think that that is a secondary, at least in my opinion, to making sure that you have quality content. Because without quality content that folks want to listen to, all of that fancy equipment and all of that money that you have spent on that fancy equipment is to a waste in some degrees. Because I think that you have to have the kind of content that people are interested in listening to.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why when I did the career strategies was fine, but that's one area. But when I went to life strategies, it broadened the horizon. I mean, there's no limit on the conversations that we can have because a lot of things fit right into our life journey. And so when individuals come on, they get a chance to tell their stories about where they started and how it has evolved and where they are today and the techniques that they used and the hurdles that they had to overcome. Because sometimes people think it's just happened overnight, and the answer is no, heck no. It did not happen overnight. Some people have been in business for 20 years and you finally got that breakthrough 5 years ago. So sometimes patience has to be a part of when you start producing a podcast. What are your thoughts on that?
No, definitely patience is very important. You definitely have to be very patient. Make sure that you are having a strategy. Strategy is very important because you have to have a strategy in the way that you are handling the podcast. So I think that just like a business plan, you need to have a podcast plan as well, because a lot of people are in a very crowded market. Because that's one of the things I was going to mention, is that they're just on Apple Podcasts. There are nearly 2.5 million podcasts listed in Apple Podcasts, but only around 450,000 of those podcasts are active. So you do have a lot of folks that are caught up in the shine or the kind of the celebrity aspect of being a
Right.
podcaster, but are they really in it for the long haul? And I think most of the folks that are involved in this network are in it for the long haul, even though we've had a few that were not as in the long haul as some of the others. But I think that the vast majority are trying to be in it for the long haul and are trying to bring some quality content. But there are a lot of folks that see that they're into it for the celebrity aspect and aren't necessarily trying to bring as much quality content as they can, and that is why a lot of them fall by the wayside. Because if you are going to be in it for the long haul, you will realize that you've got to produce quality content. I mean, you produce stuff on a weekly basis, and I actually produce multiple shows on a weekly basis and all of that. So if that is a level of that commitment that folks have to have. So if you're going to be into it, you have to be committed to being in it as well.
I love that. I love that. So, a strategy that you just shared is the commitment aspect.
Right.
Yes, the content is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Content is critical, and the commitment behind it.
Right.
And so, when you bring your guests on, again, does the guest align with what your purpose of the podcast is about as well? And the only way so many times to know that is that you have that pre-conversation with the guest so that you know it's an alignment.
Yeah. And a lot of it is also very much, some people would think that it's only for young people, but I do know some folks that are even in the older set that are listening to podcasts and listening to some of these social media outlets. And it can also be a great way to align with the causes that you are part of. Because as I mentioned before, one of the events that I was involved with was one that dealt with leukemia. So Tim Stone was a leukemia survivor,
20.
and he did a podcast in that sense and all in that way. So he did actually a podcasting marathon or telethon type deal,
Right.
and that lasted for about, he actually did two of them, but one of them lasted for about a week, and it was podcasters from around the world that literally
Ooh,
become it, and
nice.
helping him become man of the year in the area that he was at, which is in Pennsylvania. So I was one of those podcasters that participated in that. Others did as well, but definitely I was a gentleman from Alaska. There was a gentleman from England. There were a number of folks that participated worldwide.
Oh, so that's just most of Mark, what you just shared with us, different ways that you can use podcasting as well. So yes, we're here right now and we're having a one-on-one conversation, but there's other ways. You just talked about the dinner. You
Mhm.
know, I've done the birthday gatherings, I've done an anniversary gathering, I've done, a launch gathering through a podcast. So there are different ways that you can use your podcast. It's up to you. Be creative, be innovative, think outside the box and also look at how can you help? How can you help individuals who watching your podcast? What can you do that I love the fact that you talked about you solving a problem.
Mhm.
What problem are you solving? Now I
Right.
know when I did my 10th year anniversary, it wasn't about solving a problem, but it was about showing what we had done, the achievements of what has transpired in those 10 years. Because a lot of time people are not in business for 10 years.
Right.
Many times you don't even make it for 5 years. So when you make it for 10, you definitely want to be able to show what has transpired and the people that you have helped.
Oh, no doubt about that. And there's also some very interesting statistics that are out there in reference to podcasting and how the podcasting world is going. So I was actually going to share one of those as well that our listeners may be interested in, including the income. So definitely some people may be interested to know that 40% of those that listen under the age of 55 listen monthly, and 67% of podcasts and Zoom an audience between the age of 18 and 44. So a lot of the podcasters are definitely in the younger age range. And this one I found very interesting. 45% of podcast listeners have a household income of over $250,000. So imagine what that is saying to folks that are in the business world that might want to have a product to sell, because these are folks that can definitely afford something if their average household income is $250,000. So that is almost half of the podcast listeners have a household income of over $250,000. So that is definitely something that is the reason that a lot of people are looking at avenues like Spotify and others that can have them sell their product as well, because these are folks that literally can buy the product also.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the new technology that you're having right here in your hands with Pod TV, now that you're talking about, you can do the audio,
Mhm.
and then the audio can then be uploaded to Spotify. So there's still different ways that you can use that same information without having to re-record or redo it or have another segment in order to make it happen. So you're repurposing the material and the content, so which is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal.
No, there's no doubt about that and everything. So those are just some of the amazing things that are going on in that space. By the way, I don't know if you knew this, but they're saying that 68% of podcast listeners are more likely to have a postgraduate degree. So they don't even just have a regular degree, but they've got a postgraduate degree. And 74% of podcast listeners, and you'll love this since your show is about life strategies, listen to learn new things. So they are listening to try to get new information and new things that they might not have been aware of. So they are listening to these various podcasts so they can learn a different perspective, a different kind of avenue or something that they didn't know. And I do know that there are some people that even listen to podcasts to learn new skill sets and things
Yeah.
in that space. So there are a lot of folks that are using these podcasts for a variety of ways and are finding some amazing avenues to make these podcasts relevant to them, but also relevant to their audience as well.
Because a lot of time the people doing the podcast, it is a problem that they have identified, and
Mm-hmm.
they want to be able to bring a solution to it and not just see the problem and not do anything with it. And then the other one is about self-development,
Right.
because I'm like a sponge. I'm all the time wanting to learn. And if I run across a podcast and it piques my interest, I stop immediately and listen to it and then take notes. So that's why I tell everybody, bring your pen and paper with you so that you can take notes, because the whole objective is learning information is to implement it and to apply it. So that was needed as well.
Definitely that is what is needed big time. You got to have those kind of systems going on and all in that space. And there are a number of newer tools to try to get folks involved in the podcasting world. One of the things that me and Nicole put together was this idea of Max Distro, which is trying to help people learn more about podcasting and even ways to get their podcasts out there, because there are a number of ways that podcasts can be gotten out there and can be reached in that sense as well.
Oh, so are you talking about marketing, advertising?
Marketing, advertising, making sure that
Okay.
the podcasts are heard in the various avenues and all in that space.
Especially with their target market,
Right.
because we always talking about your persona or your avatar or your niche. So it's important that once you get the content and you got the podcast going, then how do you get it to the right audience so that they can hear it as well? It is the word of mouth. Is just some people help you to spread it, and some people put it on their Facebook page or LinkedIn page and help you to promote it. But also, I love what you're just saying, because there's some other things that you all are bringing forth that will help us be able to put this information in front of the right audience so that they can hear it.
Yeah, definitely. And there are new ways that people are doing that. Like I said, I know that they're talking to a group of business ladies. I think they're out of New York about bringing a business style show to the network and all in that line. So that is part of that new model that they are trying to put together, of having some people that are interested in having their content put out there. Ironically, that was one of the conversations we had earlier today, because we had a guest on that had a patent and everything, and some people were trying to figure out whether they would be able to do a show that revolved around their patent, and whether they had resources to pay for that tool and everything along those lines.
Yeah. And at the same token, you're talking about patent and you're talking about copyright, you might be talking about trademark. That's something that, Mark, that we have to take into consideration. If you're going to put that information out on a podcast, it's out there. And so if you're going to copyright it, then you need to have already had it copyrighted before you put it out there, and make notation that it has copyright rights to it. Same thing with trademarks, same thing with patents. But if you put it out there and you have not done any of those things, then you're leaving yourself open.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's one of the interesting things, was that a lot of people had been looking at podcasts, including music podcasts. And I know that there have been a couple of music podcasts, including some that I have been involved with, that are learning that you have to put some notice out there that the music is, you have the right to the music, and that that is music that can be used. And a lot of times the the kind of tools that are out there, whether it's YouTube or whether it's even Spreaker or Facebook, they want you to provide evidence that that is your music and that you have the rights to do that. I actually just got a letter recently from a Spreaker because there was a show that was R&B oriented and there was another one that was kind of more well, both of them were R&B oriented in that space, but they were definitely saying that they needed a document from the most from the musicians and others, making sure that that was actually approved in order to be shown. Otherwise, you run into some of these roadblocks that are out there as well. So people definitely need to be aware of the roadblocks and be cautious of those roadblocks as well. I know that a number of the shows will run across the banner that there is
Yeah.
the music is not being used for commercial purposes and nobody is making any profit off of this. And that is oftentimes a tool that people can use that is effective and can be efficient. It's kind of almost like the poor man's copyright in the sense that if you make that public and you do that on a consistent basis, it will sometimes stop certain folks from going after you, but it won't stop it all the time because there are times that they will still go after you for one reason or another.
And let's be fair about it, let's be legal about it.
Right.
So, if whatever you do, if you're being honest about it, then do it the right way. It's just simple
Exactly.
as that. Just simple as that. Because a lot of people spend a lot of money and time in order to get where they are to do what they've done. So the last thing we want to do is not give credit where credit is due.
Right.
So that's another thing about podcasts is that keep it legal.
Right.
All I can say, just be honest, just keep it legal. And that way it keeps us out a whole lot of hot water.
Yep, definitely have to do that. And if you are doing certain podcasts that are in certain fields, make sure that you are being above board and everything. Because one of the things that I am not a big fan of, and I mentioned it before, some people are, is I am not a big fan of scripted questions. I don't mind questions that are used as a guidance, and I've even got some from podcast guests and other services that I use that they may give you a guidance tool, but I try to stay away from scripted content just because I find that it is not as natural and it is not as informational in my sense as some of those that are very scripted. So I'm not a big fan of overly scripted kind of a podcast in that sense. And I am totally not a fan, even though there are some people that are in this lane of what I call paid guests, because a lot of times there are people that will come on shows and want a certain amount of money and all in that space and all in that kind of way. And I run away from those kind of folks because I am not trying to put myself in that jeopardy. And a lot of the services that I use, like podcast guests, will tell you that they are not fans of either the podcaster being paid or the guest being paid. So that is something you also have to be cautious of as well.
But one of the things, Mark, is my understanding that we'd like to see happen here at Pod TV is advertisement.
Yes.
We'd like to have individuals that come on, that our guests that come on and maybe advertise, along while they're here. And that is a fee for advertisement.
Right.
So that's an option, that our guests are be able to select from as well.
That is very much the case because any business, and particularly a business that is in media, it is oftentimes the advertisement. It is how they are able to stay alive. And that doesn't matter whether it is newspapers or whether it is the radio or television or a number of other things as well. So definitely it is something that we need to be aware of, is that most media is a business at the end of the day as well. So definitely you have to have sources of revenue in order to stay afloat.
Exactly. Well, we had Patty Williams with us, and she said thanks. She enjoyed the show. So the information has been very, very received. Thank Mark. I just want to thank you so much, Mark, for coming on and talking about podcasts, because I know when I first started my podcast, I was very nervous about it. Really didn't know what I was doing. And I had someone to challenge me and said, Maxine, you have so much information on careers and helping individuals to get their career path going in the profession to choose. Why not do a podcast? And I said, okay, let's try it. I went on and talked for about 3 minutes. And next thing I know, I said, meet me back here next week at the same time. And I've been here for 3 years now. So you just never know how it's going to end up happening. But the most important thing is look at your content and be willing to help others. Be willing to share your wisdom. So Mark, give us some closing strategy, or tell individuals how they can reach out to you.
Oh, definitely. If they want to reach out to me, they can definitely reach out even about opportunities in the podcasting lane or in other lanes by reaching out at bluesradio@gmail.com. That is the primary email that I use, and all along those lines. And I would definitely be willing to have those conversations and everything. And then, of course, we'll walk them through the process as to creating their own and all in that kind of space. And of course, as several friends of mine have told me, consulting is something that you have to get some monetary for as well. So definitely I can do an initial conversation, but after that we'll have to talk about strategy calls and all along those lines. But definitely it is something that I am open to having those conversations, but we can have an initial email and all in that space of 15 minutes or so. And they can also get on my Calendly if they're interested, and that is calendly.com/blues radio, since I do have that blues background as well. So if they want to go to calendly.com/blues radio, they can definitely book a Calendly session, and we can try to find ways to have some rewards coming to even some new shows and all in that space, because I know the network is trying to find new content. And of course, I'm always willing to have those conversations and help people get their visions aligned and all of that. And there's things that I don't know, and I admit that I don't know, but I have friends in my allegiance that know those a lot better than I do. So I would never claim to be the one that knows about AI or any of those kind of things, but I do have friends that are in that space that can have those conversations much greater than I can.
All right. Well, you've heard it right here. You've give you his contact information. Just know that same thing with Levelist. We're here to work with those professions in transition and our students, which are high school and college students who are still undecided or need direction on what is the best career path for their innate or natural abilities that they do every day. Reach out to me at levelistco.com. Let's get you started. Parents and students, we're ready for you. And those who are in professionals and those who are unsure even how to get promoted, let us get you that promotion. So this is going to do it for us this evening. Marc, again, thank you for being here. Executive producer, PODTV.tv. And the Marc Lee, the Lee Entertainment.
Yes.
So I appreciate you. This is Maxine Phillips, your host with the Maxine Pearl Phillips Life Strategy Show. I'm calling it an evening, but know one thing. I believe in you, and I trust you believe in yourself. So have a great day.
Taking a chance.